The Nevada sun beat down on Nellis Air Force Base with the kind of heat that made the tarmac shimmer like water. Captain Lauren Mitchell stood at parade rest outside the operations building, her flight suit crisp despite the temperature pushing past 100 degrees. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes, waiting for the new base commander to see her dot inside. Colonel Frank Brennan was making it clear he didn't appreciate what he'd inherited. "I don't care what her record says." Brennan's voice carried through the thin office walls. "Flying's a young man's game, and I won't have my combat readiness compromised by political correctness." Lauren's jaw tightened, but she didn't move. At 34, she'd heard variations of this speech before. What Brennan didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to check, was that she'd logged more combat hours in an F-22 Raptor than any pilot on this base. But brass like Brennan rarely checked. They saw what they wanted to see. When she was finally called in, Brennan didn't stand. He barely looked up from the papers on his desk. "Captain Mitchell," he said, his tone flat. "I've reviewed the flight schedules. I'm reassigning you to training duty. We have new recruits coming in who need basic orientation flights." Lauren felt her stomach drop. "Sir, with respect, I'm scheduled to lead the red flag exercises next month. My squadron, your squadron, will be reassigned to Major Caldwell." Brennan finally looked at her, his eyes cold. He has the experience needed for that level of responsibility. "Major Caldwell has half my flight hours, sir. He also has the temperament." Brennan leaned back in his chair. "I've read the incident reports from your last deployment. Taking unnecessary risks, showboating, that might fly in some squadrons, but not under my command." Lauren's hands clenched behind her back. The unnecessary risks had been a split-second decision that saved 3 helicopters from surface-to-air missiles. The showboating was executing a maneuver that disabled enemy radar long enough for a rescue operation to succeed. She'd received a commendation for that mission. "Request permission to speak freely, sir." "Denied." Brennan waved his hand dismissively. "Report to training operations at 0600 tomorrow." "Dismissed." Lauren saluted and walked out, her composure held together by years of military discipline. But inside, something was cracking. She'd given everything to this uniform. She'd missed her father's funeral to fly a critical mission. She'd spent birthdays in cockpits over hostile territory. And now she was being grounded because a new commander had decided she didn't fit his image of what a fighter pilot should be. Outside, she found her wingman, Lieutenant Danny Ortega, waiting by her truck. "That bad?" he asked, reading her face. "Training duty." Danny swore under his breath. "Ghost, that's insane. You're the best pilot we have." Ghost, her call sign. She'd earned it on her 3rd combat deployment when she disappeared from enemy radar for 40 minutes, taken out 3 surface-to-air missile sites, and reappeared before anyone realized she'd gone hunting. The name had stuck, and with it came a reputation that opened doors and closed others. "Brennan doesn't care about any of that," Lauren said quietly. "He's already made up his mind. So what are you going to do?" Lauren looked out across the flight line, where F-22s sat like sleeping predators in the afternoon sun. She dreamed of flying since she was 6 years old, watching her uncle's crop duster dance across Oklahoma skies. She'd fought her way through the academy, through flight school, through every obstacle placed in her path. She wasn't going to let one narrow-minded colonel take it all away. "I'm going to do my job," she said finally. "And when the opportunity comes, I'm going to remind everyone why they gave me those wings." What Lauren didn't know was that opportunity would come sooner than she expected. And it would arrive in the form of a crisis that would make Brennan's prejudices seem like a distant memory. But that was still 3 days away. For now, she drove home to her small apartment off base, where photos of her late father, a Vietnam veteran, watched from the walls, and where she'd spend another night wondering if sacrifice and excellence would ever be enough The next morning, Lauren reported to training operations as ordered. The officer in charge, Captain Raymond Foster, at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Ghost, I want you to know this wasn't my call," he said. "We all know what you can do up there. Appreciate it, Ray." Lauren took the clipboard with her new assignments. "What have you got for me? Basic orientation flights? Some simulation instruction? Paperwork, mostly." He paused. "There's also a group coming in Friday. Navy SEALs doing joint operations training. They requested our best pilot for demonstration flights." Lauren looked up. "Brennan approved that?" "He doesn't know yet. Request came through last night, straight from JSOC. They specifically asked for the pilot with call sign Ghost." Friday morning arrived with a sandstorm warning and temperatures that would make flight operations challenging. Lauren arrived at the hangar at 0500 to prep her aircraft, only to find Colonel Brennan waiting near the flight line with Major Caldwell. "Captain Mitchell," Brennan called out. "What are you doing here?" "Preparing for the SEAL training demonstration, sir." "It's on my... There's been a change of plans." Brennan gestured to Caldwell. "Major Caldwell will be handling the demonstration." Lauren felt her professionalism slipping. "Sir, the request specifically asked for me, and I'm specifically reassigning it." Brennan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Let me be clear, Captain. I don't care what some Navy coordinator requested. I decide who flies what on my base. You're grounded for today." "Colonel, with respect, that wasn't a request, Captain. It was an order." Brennan turned to walk away, then stopped. "And Mitchell? If I hear about you questioning my decisions again, you'll find yourself flying a desk for the rest of your career. Permanently." Major Caldwell at least had the grace to look embarrassed. "Ghost, I'm sorry. I didn't ask for this." "I know, Steve." Lauren handed him her flight notes. "Just be careful out there. The crosswinds are going to be rough above 8,000 feet." As she watched Caldwell walk toward the F-22, her radio crackled. "Captain Mitchell, this is Lieutenant Ortega. You need to get to operations. Now." The urgency in Danny's voice made her jog to the operations center. Inside, she found chaos. Radio squawking, officers shouting coordinates, and on the main screen, a situation that made her blood run cold. "What happened?" she demanded. "Helicopter went down 60 miles northeast," Danny explained quickly. "Medical transport carrying wounded personnel from a training accident. They were trying to beat the sandstorm and lost power. Crashed in the mountains. Rescue? That's the problem. The sandstorm is getting worse. Ground crews can't reach them in time, and the storm is interfering with GPS navigation. They need someone who can fly those canyons without instruments." Lauren's mind was already calculating angles, wind speeds, terrain. She'd flown those mountains in worse conditions. What about search and rescue? Their birds can't handle the winds. They need something fast and maneuverable. Danny looked at her meaningfully. They need a Raptor, Ghost, and they need a pilot who can navigate by sight alone. Brennan will never approve it. Brennan's not here. He went with Caldwell for the demonstration. Danny pulled up a map. There are 8 people on that helicopter. 4 wounded soldiers and 4 medical staff. One of them is Senator Morrison's daughter. She's a trauma nurse who volunteered for the transport. Lauren's decision took less than a second. "Get me clearance." "Already working on it." "General Hayes at command is on the line." She grabbed the phone. "General, this is Captain Mitchell. Ghost." General Patricia Hayes' voice was terse. "I'm told you can make this flight." "Yes, ma'am. I've flown those canyons in simulation and real conditions. I can get there. Colonel Brennan has you on training duty." "Yes, ma'am." There was a pause. "Captain, if you take this flight without Brennan's approval, it could end your career." Lauren looked at the screen showing the crash coordinates. 8 people. 8 lives hanging in the balance while bureaucracy played its games. She thought of her father, who'd flown rescue missions in Vietnam. She thought of every reason she put on this uniform in the first place. General, with respect. I didn't join the Air Force to watch people die while I waited for permission to do my job. Another pause. Then, you're cleared for takeoff, Captain. Bring them home. Lauren was in her flight suit and running for the hangar in 30 seconds. Her crew chief, Master Sergeant Linda Warren, was already prepping a Raptor. Heard you might need this, Captain, Warren said, checking fuel levels. Thanks, Linda. Ghost? Warren stopped her. My nephew was on that helicopter. He's 19 years old, fresh out of boot camp. Lauren gripped the older woman's shoulder. I'll bring him back. I promise. The F-22 roared to life, and Lauren felt the familiar surge of purpose that came with every flight. This was what she was meant to do. Not train recruits. Not shuffle papers. This dot as she taxied to the runway, her radio crackled with Colonel Brennan's voice. Mitchell, what the hell do you think you're doing? Rescue mission, sir. Cleared by General Hayes. You get back here right now, Captain. That is a direct order. Lauren paused, her finger on the throttle. Then she thought of Linda Warren's nephew, of the senator's daughter who'd volunteered to help wounded soldiers, of 8 people who had minutes, maybe less, before the sandstorm buried them completely. Sir, I'm experiencing radio interference, she said calmly. Might be the storm. I'll report when I return. Ghost out. She cut the connection and pushed the throttle forward. The F-22 screamed down the runway and lifted into air that was already thick with sand. Below, she knew Brennan was probably ordering her court-martialed. Above, 8 people were running out of time. The mountains rose ahead like jagged teeth. Lauren had exactly 43 minutes to pull off a miracle. And Colonel Frank Brennan had just given her every reason to succeed. The sandstorm hit like a physical force at 8,000 feet. Visibility dropped to near zero, and the F-22 bucked into violent crosswinds. Lauren switched off the autopilot and flew by feel, her hands steady on the controls, despite the turbulence that would have grounded most pilots. Ghost, this is Rescue Coordinator. We're reading wind speeds at 70 knots. Recommend you abort. Negative, Coordinator. I'm 20 miles out. Captain, you're flying blind. I've got terrain radar and 12 years of mountain flying. Lauren banked hard right. Threading between 2 peaks she couldn't see, but knew were there from memory and instruments. The people on that helicopter don't have 12 years. She dropped to 5,000 feet, below the worst of the storm. The world became a brown haze, but she could make out shapes now, the darker shadows of canyon walls, the jagged outlines of rock formations. She'd studied these mountains for years, flown them in every season. Now that knowledge was the difference between life and death, her radar pinged. I've got the crash site, 2 miles north-northwest. Ghost, there's no landing zone. Repeat, no LZ. I'm not landing, Coordinator. I'm providing cover and coordinates for ground rescue. But even as she said it, Lauren knew the truth. Ground rescue couldn't get there in time. The storm was worsening, and the helicopter had crashed on a narrow ridge that was already crumbling. She brought the Raptor lower, the canyon walls sliding past, so close she could see individual boulders through the brown haze. The helicopter appeared suddenly, a broken bird lying on its side, rotors twisted, smoke rising from the engine. I have visual, Lauren reported. Helicopter is severely damaged. I'm seeing movement near the wreckage. She circled once, then twice, her mind racing. The ridge was too narrow for any rescue helicopter, and it was collapsing. Even as she watched, a section of rock broke away and tumbled down the mountainside. The helicopter shifted dangerously closer to the edge. Coordinator, That ridge won't hold much longer. We need immediate evacuation. Ghost, there's no way to get them out. Even our pavehawks can't handle these winds in that terrain. Lauren's jaw set. Then I guess we need to get creative. She climbed to 10,000 feet and opened a secure channel. Nellis, this is Ghost. I need halo gear dropped at my coordinates. Full emergency kit. Ghost, what are you planning? Something incredibly stupid or incredibly brilliant. Haven't decided which yet. What Lauren was about to attempt had never been done from an F-22. The aircraft wasn't designed for cargo drops, and the conditions were barely flyable. But she'd spent 6 months cross-training with Special Operations Command, learning techniques that most fighter pilots never saw. Nellis, I also need a C-130 standing by at the coordinates I'm sending. Have them come in from the west, below the storm line. Ghost, are you planning what I think you're planning? Depends on whether you think I'm completely insane. She dove back toward the crash site, her mind calculating angles and probabilities. The wreckage was perched on a ridge about 30 feet wide. Beyond it, a 1,000-foot drop. The winds were gusting to 70 knots, and she had maybe 15 minutes before that ridge collapsed completely. People on the ground, she broadcast on emergency frequency. This is Air Force Captain Lauren Mitchell. Call sign Ghost. If you can hear me, wave something. A figure emerged from behind the wreckage, waving what looked like a white medical coat. Then another figure. Then 6 more. All 8 were alive. Lauren's relief lasted exactly 2 seconds before professional assessment took over. Listen carefully. I'm bringing in an evacuation aircraft, but we need to stabilize your position first. I'm going to make a low pass. When I do, I'll deploy emergency supplies. Get everyone secured to the helicopter frame. Do not let anyone near that edge. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. The Raptor screamed down the canyon, so low that her wingtips nearly brushed rock. At precisely the right moment, she activated the emergency flare launcher, modified for this mission to carry a small cargo pod. That pod hit the ridge and broke open, spilling high-strength cables, harnesses, and carabiners. Not standard equipment for a fighter jet, but Lauren had loaded them herself before takeoff, ignoring regulations that said F-22s didn't carry rescue gear. Secure everyone to those cables, she broadcast. Clip them to anything solid. And that means solid check every anchor point twice. As the survivors scrambled to follow her instructions, Lauren climbed again and switched frequencies. Nellis, I need that C-130 now. Ghost, the C-130 can't land on that ridge. It doesn't need to land. Just needs to get close enough. For what? For a Fulton extraction. There was dead silence on the radio. The Fulton surface-to-air recovery system hadn't been used in decades. It involved a balloon, a cable, and an aircraft snagging the cable mid-flight to pull personnel off the ground. It was dangerous, outdated, and probably insane. It was also their only option. Ghost, the coordinator said carefully. Fulton extractions require special equipment. Equipment we don't have readily available. Check the Special Operations storage at Hangar 7. They keep vintage gear for training. Lauren banked hard, fighting the winds. And get me someone who knows how to rig it. We've got about 10 minutes before that ridge collapses. Below, she could see the survivors securing themselves to the cable she dropped. They worked with the efficiency of people who knew their lives depended on following instructions exactly. Ghost, Special Ops is rigging the Fulton gear now. 100 to 130 is wheels up in 5 minutes. Make it 3. Captain, the pilot says he's never done a Fulton extraction. Then tell him he's about to learn. Lauren brought the Raptor down again, this time flying a pattern around the crash site, using her jet wash to clear some of the sand from the air. It was a trick she'd learned in Afghanistan, dangerous and technically against protocol, but effective. Through the clearing air, She could see the survivors more clearly now. They'd formed a tight group, all secured to the cables. One of them was waving at her Raptor, a thumbs-up gesture that made her throat tight. "Hang on," she whispered, though they couldn't hear her. "Just hang on a little longer." The K-130's rumble announced its arrival before she saw it, a massive cargo plane threading through the canyon like a whale swimming through coral. Lauren had to admire the pilot's skill. Flying a Hercules in these conditions took nerve. "Ghost, this is Hercules 27. We're in position. Copy that, Hercules." The package is marked with orange smoke. "You'll need to come in from the northwest. Drop altitude to 300 feet and snag the Fulton line on your first pass. That ridge won't survive a second attempt." "Understood. Beginning approach now." Lauren climbed to give the C-130 room, but kept her radar locked on both aircraft and the crash site. One mistake, one miscalculation, and 8 people would die while she watched. The C-130 descended into the canyon. The Hercules was like watching a ballet dancer perform in a hurricane. The massive cargo plane fought crosswinds that wanted to slam it into the canyon walls, its pilot making constant corrections that kept the wings level and the approach steady. Lauren orbited above, her eyes locked on the crash site. The ridge was visibly crumbling now, chunks of rock breaking away and tumbling down the mountainside. The helicopter had shifted another few feet toward the edge. "Hercules 27, you've got maybe one shot at this," Lauren transmitted. "The survivors are clustered at coordinates I'm painting now. Fulton lines should be perpendicular to their position. Copy that, Ghost. Coming around for approach." On the ground, the survivors had done exactly as instructed. They'd secured themselves to the high-strength cables and anchored everything to the most stable parts of the wreckage. One figure stood slightly apart from the others, probably the senior person taking charge. Through her targeting system, Lauren could see them organizing the group, checking everyone's harnesses. The C-130 made its approach, dropping to just 300 feet above the ridge. The Fulton Systems balloon rose from the survivor group, carrying a cable that stretched up into the brown sky like a lifeline to heaven. "Steady," Lauren whispered, watching the distance close. "Steady ... The C-130's catch mechanism extended 2 angled poles designed to snag the cable. The pilot came in at exactly the right angle, exactly the right speed. Time seemed to stretch as the poles reached for the cable. Contact. The cable snapped tight, and 8 people were yanked off the crumbling ridge just as a massive section of rock gave way beneath them. The helicopter, its anchor gone, tumbled over the edge and disappeared into the canyon below. Lauren's breath caught. For a terrifying second, she thought the cable would break from the sudden jerk. But the Fulton system held, and the C-130's winch began reeling in the survivors, pulling them up toward the cargo bay. "Extraction successful," the Hercules pilot reported, his voice tight with relief. "All 8 survivors secured. We're climbing out now." "Copy that, Hercules." Lauren felt her hand shaking on the controls for the first time all mission. "Good flying. Couldn't have done it without your coordinates, Ghost. That was some impressive flying." Lauren didn't respond. She was too busy watching the empty ridge where 8 people had been standing moments before. The entire section collapsed as she watched, taking the last traces of the crash site with it. 5 more seconds. They'd have maybe 5 more seconds before that ridge gave way. "Ghost, this is Nellis. Return to base." The command brought her back to reality. Return to base, where Colonel Brennan was undoubtedly waiting to end her career. She disobeyed a direct order, taken an unauthorized aircraft, performed maneuvers that weren't in any manual, and probably violated about 40 different regulations. "Copy that, Nellis." Ghost returning to base. The flight back was surreal. The sandstorm was clearing, revealing the stark beauty of the Nevada desert below. Lauren flew on autopilot, her mind replaying every moment of the rescue. 8 people alive because she'd refused to follow an unjust order. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like an ending. Nellis Air Force Base appeared on the horizon, its runways stretching out like judgment. Lauren began her landing approach, noting the unusual amount of activity on the ground. There were vehicles everywhere, far more than normal. "Ghost, be advised. We have a reception committee waiting," Nellis Tower reported. "Understood." Lauren brought the Raptor down smoothly, her landing perfect despite her exhaustion. As she taxied toward the hangar, she could see the crowd. Colonel Brennan stood at the front, his face red even from a distance. But behind him were others. Lots of others. Lauren shut down the engines and popped the canopy. The heat hit her immediately, but she barely noticed. She climbed down the ladder, removed her helmet, and walked toward Brennan with her head high. "Captain Mitchell," Brennan started, his voice shaking with rage. "Stand aside, Colonel." The voice was quiet but carried absolute authority. The crowd parted, and Lauren saw a 4-star general walking toward her. General Patricia Hayes, commander of Air Combat Command. Behind her were the survivors from the helicopter, still wrapped in emergency blankets, flanked by a group of Navy SEALs in full-dress uniforms. "Captain Lauren Mitchell," General Hayes said formally, "I need to ask you something." Lauren stood at attention. "Yes, ma'am. During your time in Afghanistan, you flew a mission that was classified above my clearance level. A mission that involved extracting a SEAL team from behind enemy lines after their helicopter was shot down. You flew through a mountain pass that was supposedly impossible to navigate, under fire, and brought out 12 men who would have died otherwise." General Hayes stepped closer. "Is that accurate?" "Yes, ma'am." "And those SEALs gave you a call sign, a nickname they only give to operators they consider one of their own." Hayes gestured to the SEALs standing behind her. "Would you tell Colonel Brennan what they called you?" Lauren glanced at the SEALs. They were all standing at attention, but she recognized one of them, Senior Chief Marcus Webb, the team leader from that mission 3 years ago. "They called me Ghost." "Ma'am," Lauren said quietly. "Show him." Hayes ordered. Senior Chief Webb stepped forward. He reached up to his uniform and unpinned something from his chest, a SEAL trident, the coveted insignia that marked him as one of America's elite warriors. He walked to Lauren and, with ceremonial precision, pressed it into her hand. "Captain Mitchell," Webb said, his voice carrying across the silent tarmac, "you flew into hell to pull us out. You didn't have to. You weren't tasked with rescue. But you came anyway." He stepped back and saluted a slow, deliberate gesture of profound respect. Then every SEAL on that tarmac saluted. Then every officer in the crowd. Then even General Hayes. Colonel Brennan stood frozen, his face pale as the truth crashed down on him. The pilot he dismissed, grounded, and nearly destroyed was a legend among the people who understood what real courage looked like. "Colonel Brennan," General Hayes said coldly, "you will report to my office at 1800 hours. We need to discuss your command decisions and whether you're fit to evaluate the pilots under your authority." She turned back to Lauren. "Captain Mitchell, you saved 8 lives today, including Senator Morrison's daughter and the nephew of Master Sergeant Warren. You also violated several direct orders, disobeyed your commanding officer, and took risks that could have resulted in disaster." Hayes paused. "Any comment?" Lauren met her gaze steadily. "No excuse, ma'am. I'd do it again." A ghost of a smile touched Hayes' face. "I know you would. That's why I'm recommending you for the Distinguished Flying Cross, and why I'm personally overseeing you transfer out of Colonel Brennan's chain of command." The next morning, Lauren stood in the same spot where she'd waited for Brennan just days before. But this time, she was waiting for a very different meeting. The door opened, and Senator Morrison walked out. He was a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much grief in the past 24 hours. Behind him was a young woman in her late 20s, with bandages on her arms and her father's determined expression. "Captain Mitchell," the senator said, extending his hand. "I'm told protocol says I should make an appointment and go through proper channels. To hell with protocol. I needed to meet the woman who saved my daughter's life." Lawrence shook his hand. "Senator, I was just doing my job." "No," the woman said, stepping forward. "You were doing what was right, even when it cost you everything." She smiled. "I'm Dr. Amy Morrison. I was on that helicopter. I saw what you did, how you flew through that storm, how you coordinated the rescue, how you didn't give up even when it seemed impossible. I had help from a lot of people," Lawrence said. "But you made the choice," Senator Morrison said. "When someone told you to stand down, to follow orders that would have killed 8 people, you chose to save lives instead." He paused. "I've spent 30 years in Washington, Captain. I've seen too many people choose career over conscience. You didn't. That matters." Amy Morrison pulled something from her pocket, a small medal on a blue ribbon. "This was my grandfather's. He was a pilot in World War II, flew bombers over Germany." She pressed it into Lauren's hands. "He always said the mark of a true pilot wasn't skill or bravery. It was knowing when the rules were less important than the mission. I think he'd want you to have this." Lauren looked down at the medal, her vision blurring. "I can't accept this." "You already did," Amy said softly. "And Captain? Linda Warren asked me to give you a message. Her nephew, Private Danny Wan, he's going to be fine. Broken leg, but fine. He wanted you to know he's signing up for flight school. Says he wants to fly with pilots like you." After they left, Lauren stood alone in the corridor, holding the medal and trying to process everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. Her career hadn't ended. Instead, it had been validated in a way she'd never expected. "Captain Mitchell?" She turned to find Master Sergeant Warren standing there, tears streaming down her face. "Sergeant," Warren pulled her into a fierce hug. "Thank you. Thank you for bringing my boy home." They stood there for a long moment. 2 military women who understood sacrifice and duty and the weight of every decision made in uniform. When Warren finally pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. "General Hayes wants to see you." Conference Room 3. The conference room was filled with officers Lauren recognized from news broadcasts and military history books. General Hayes sat at the head of the table, with Senior Chief Webb and several other SEALs standing along the wall. "Captain Mitchell," Hayes said. "Please sit." Lauren sat, acutely aware of the weight of experience and authority in the room. "I'm going to be direct," Hayes continued. "We have a problem in the military. We have officers like Colonel Brennan who make decisions based on prejudice instead of competence. We have a culture where following orders is valued over saving lives. And we have talented pilots being wasted because someone decided they don't fit a certain image." She leaned forward. "I want to change that. And I need pilots like you to help me do it. Ma'am, I'm forming a new unit. Special Operations Aviation Command. We'll work directly with SEAL teams, Special Forces, and any unit that needs pilots who can think outside the box." Hayes slid a folder across the table. "You'd be one of the founding members. It means more danger, more difficult missions, and probably more conflicts with officers who think like Brennan." Lauren opened the folder. Inside were mission parameters, unit structure, and a roster of names she recognized, all pilots with reputations for being too good, too unconventional, or too unwilling to play politics. "What happened to Colonel Brennan?" she asked. "He's being reassigned to a logistics position where his organizational skills can be used and his command decisions won't endanger pilots." Hayes' expression hardened. He'll never command a flight squadron again. Senior Chief Webb stepped forward. "Captain, I've got something for you." He held out a patch of ghost rendered in silver thread against black fabric with the letters SOAC beneath it. "If you accept this posting, you'll be the first pilot to wear this. First, but not last." Lauren looked around the room at the faces watching her. These were warriors who understood what she'd done and why she'd done it. They weren't offering her an easy path. They were offering her a harder one, but one that mattered. She thought of her father, who'd spent 30 years flying rescue missions and training pilots. He'd told her once that the military wasn't perfect, but it was filled with people trying to do better. People who believed in something bigger than themselves. "I accept," Lauren said. The room erupted in applause. Senior Chief Webb pinned the patch on her flight suit, and for the first time in days, Lauren felt like she could breathe. That afternoon, she drove to the small military cemetery outside Las Vegas, where her father was buried. She sat by his headstone, the new patch on her shoulder and the medal from Amy Morrison's grandfather in her hand. "I think you'd be proud," she said quietly. "I didn't let them ground me. I didn't let someone else's prejudice define what I could do." The wind picked up, carrying sand across the graves. In the distance, an F-22 took off from Nellis, its engine screaming as it climbed into the Nevada sky. Lauren stood and saluted her father's grave, then walked back to her truck. She had a new unit to join, new missions to fly, and a whole career of people to prove wrong. But more importantly, she had 8 people alive because she'd refused to accept an unjust order. She had a 19-year-old kid who was going to become a pilot because he'd seen what courage looked like. And she had a patch on her shoulder that meant she'd never have to justify her presence in a cockpit again. 3 weeks later, Lauren stood on a stage at Nellis Air Force Base during a ceremony honoring the rescue mission. Senator Morrison was there, as were all 8 survivors. The crowd included hundreds of military personnel, families, and press. General Hayes presented Lauren with the Distinguished Flying Cross, the nation's highest aviation award for heroism. As she pinned it to Lauren's uniform, she leaned close and whispered, "You know this is going to make you a target for every hard-ass colonel who thinks like Brennan." "Yes, ma'am," Lauren whispered back. "I'm counting on it." When Lauren stepped to the microphone, she looked out at the crowd and saw faces that represented everything she'd fought for. Master Sergeant Warren and her nephew, both beaming. Danny Ortega, her wingman, standing proud in his dress uniform. Amy Morrison, who'd recovered enough to return to her hospital work. And in the back, standing slightly apart, was a group of young women in Air Force uniforms. They were cadets, barely old enough to vote, but they watched Lauren with the kind of intensity that spoke of dreams and determination. "I'm not a hero," Lauren said into the microphone. "I'm a pilot who had a choice between following a bad order and saving lives. That's not heroism, that's basic human decency." She paused. "But I am standing here today because other people chose to help me when I needed it. Because a general believed competence mattered more than prejudice. Because a crew chief had my back even when it could have cost her career. Because 8 people on a mountain trusted a voice on a radio telling them to hold on." She looked directly at the young cadets in the back. "If there's any message I want to leave today, it's this. The uniform doesn't make you courageous. Courage is choosing to do what's right, even when everything in you screams that it's safer to follow orders. Courage is betting your career on the lives of people you've never met. And courage is refusing to let anyone tell you that you don't belong in a place where your skills, dedication, and heart have earned you the right to stand." The applause was thunderous, but Lauren barely heard it. She was watching those young cadets, seeing in their faces the same fire she'd carried through every obstacle of her own career. Later, as the crowd dispersed, one of the cadets approached her. She was small, barely meeting the height requirement for pilots, with nervous energy radiating from her. "Captain Mitchell? I'm Cadet Lisa Chun. I'm in flight school, and She paused, gathering courage. "Some of my instructors say I'm too small, too cautious, that I don't have the aggressive instinct for combat flying." Lauren smiled. "Let me guess. They want you to wash out before you waste anyone's time?" "Yes, ma'am. And what do you think?" Lisa straightened. "I think they're wrong. I think being cautious means I calculate risks better. I think being small means I handle G-forces more efficiently. And I think I'm going to be one of the best pilots they ever trained." Lauren reached up and unpinned the SEAL trident that Senior Chief Webb had given her. She pressed it into Lisa's hand. "This was given to me by people who judge competence over appearance. Hold on to it when those instructors tell you that you don't belong. And when you get your wings, not if, but when you give this to another pilot who needs to remember why we do this." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me yet," Lauren said with a slight smile. "Thank me by proving them all wrong." As Lisa walked away, clutching the trident like a talisman, Senior Chief Webb appeared at Lauren's side. "You gave away your good luck charm," he observed. "She needs it more than I do." Lauren watched the young cadet rejoin her classmates, already standing taller. "Besides, I don't need luck anymore, Chief. I've got something better." "What's that?" "A mission that matters and people who have my back." She turned to face him. "Speaking of which, General Hayes mentioned the new unit's first assignment. Care to brief me?" Webb's expression became serious. "Hostage situation. American aid workers captured in Yemen. Conventional rescue won't work. The terrain's impossible, and the window is closing fast. They need someone who can fly into places that don't exist on maps. Sounds like my kind of mission." "That's what I told the general." Webb extended his hand. "Welcome to the team, Ghost. It's going to be one hell of a ride." Lauren shook his hand, feeling the weight of new responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was what she'd signed up for, not glory or recognition, but the chance to make a difference where it counted most. That evening, she returned to her apartment and began packing. The new unit would be based in Virginia, closer to Special Operations Command. It meant leaving Nevada, leaving the familiar routines of Nellis, leaving the place where she'd nearly lost everything. But it also meant moving towards something better. A command where his skills would be valued, where decisions were made based on capability rather than prejudice, where every mission would push her to be better than she'd been the day before. Her phone rang. It was Danny Ortega. "Hey, Ghost, got a minute?" "Always. What's up?" "I just got orders. Transfer to SOAC. Apparently, General Hayes wants the whole team that coordinated the rescue." He paused. "I know you probably requested me, so." "Thanks," Lauren smiled. "I didn't request anyone, Danny. Hayes picked you because you're a damn good pilot, and you kept your head during a crisis. You earned this." "Well, either way, looks like we're still flying together. Looks like it." Lauren glanced around her sparse apartment, already mentally cataloging what to keep and what to leave behind. "Danny, that thing you asked me after Brennan grounded me, what I was going to do. Yeah? I'm glad I didn't give up. I'm glad I kept fighting." "Me too, Ghost. Me too." After they hung up, Lauren walked to her window. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. In the distance, she could see the control tower at Nellis, its lights just beginning to flicker on for the night shift. She thought about Colonel Brennan, probably sitting in some logistics office reviewing supply manifests instead of commanding pilots. Part of her felt sympathy for him. He was a product of an older system, one that valued conformity over innovation. But mostly she felt relief that his kind of leadership was being challenged, slowly but surely, by people who understood that excellence had no gender, no age requirement, no specific appearance. Her father's photograph sat on the small table by the window. In it, he stood beside a helicopter in Vietnam, young and proud in his flight suit, surrounded by the crew he'd saved on what would be his final rescue mission. "I get it now, Dad," Lauren said softly. "You used to say the uniform was heavier than it looked, not because of the fabric, but because of what it represented, the promise to serve something bigger than yourself, even when the cost was high." She touched the distinguished flying cross on her dress uniform, hanging ready for tomorrow's departure. Next to it was the patch from SOAC, the ghost symbol that would now define her career. "I'm carrying that weight now, and I'm going to make sure it counts." The next morning, Lauren drove through the gates of Nellis Air Force Base one last time as a permanent resident. She stopped at the hangar where her F-22 sat, newly painted with the SOAC insignia. Master Sergeant Warren was there, supervising the final maintenance checks. "She's ready for the flight to Virginia," Warren said, patting the aircraft's fuselage, with the affection of someone who'd spent 30 years keeping pilots safe. "I made sure she's perfect." "I know you did, Linda." Lauren did her own walk-around inspection, checking seals and control surfaces with the thoroughness that had become second nature. "Have you heard from Danny? How's he doing?" "Had gone out of the hospital yesterday. Already talking about flight school." Warren's voice was thick with emotion. "He told me you visited him 3 times. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. He survived because we all did our jobs. That makes us family." Lauren finished her inspection and turned to face the older woman. "Linda, I want you to know something. When I was standing outside Brennan's office, listening to him dismiss everything I'd accomplished, you were the first person I thought about. You've been in this uniform longer than I've been alive. You've seen every kind of pilot come through these hangars, and you've never once treated me like I didn't belong." Warren's eyes glistened. "That's because you never gave me a reason to. You show up early, you work harder than anyone, and you never ask for special treatment. That's not about being a woman or a man. That's about being a professional." They embraced, 2 warriors who'd fought different battles but understood the same truths. "Give him hell in Virginia, Ghost," Warren said. "And if you ever need a crew chief who knows how to keep a Raptor flying in impossible conditions, you know where to find me." Lauren climbed into the cockpit, running through her pre-flight checklist with the efficiency of someone who'd done it thousands of times. But today felt different. Today she wasn't just flying to a new base. She was flying toward a future she'd earned through sacrifice, courage, and an unwillingness to accept anyone else's limitations. "Nellis Tower, this is Ghost requesting clearance for departure." "Ghost, you are cleared for takeoff." "And Captain?" The tower controller's voice softened. "It's been an honor watching you fly. Give him something to remember." Lauren smiled inside her helmet. "Copy that, Tower. Ghost is rolling." The F-22 accelerated down the runway, the ground falling away as she pulled back on the stick. The Nevada desert spread below her, vast and unforgiving and beautiful. This was where she'd nearly lost everything. This was also where she'd discovered what she was truly made of. She climbed through 20,000 feet, then 30,000, the sky deepening to a darker blue. At 40,000 feet, with the curvature of the earth visible on the horizon, Lauren leveled off and set her course for Virginia. Behind her, Nevada disappeared into the distance. Ahead lay new challenges, new missions, and a team that would depend on her leadership as much as her flying skills. But in this moment, suspended between Earth and space, Lauren felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. "Dad," she said quietly into the empty cockpit, "I made it. Not despite the obstacles, but because of them. Every person who said I couldn't, every officer who tried to ground me, every moment I wanted to quit, they all led here. To this flight, to this mission, To this life I chose and fought to keep. The radio crackled with routine traffic controllers coordinating flights, pilots checking in, the constant background noise of military aviation. Lauren listened with half an ear, her mind already planning for the hostage rescue mission that awaited her. 8 people alive because she'd refused a bad order. A young cadet holding a SEAL trident and believing in her own future. A unit formed to value competence over conformity. A 19-year-old kid who'd survived to become a pilot because someone had cared enough to risk everything. That was the real measure of success, not medals or promotions, but lives changed and futures secured. That was why she wore the uniform, why she'd endure whatever challenges came next. The F-22's engines hummed with power as Lauren Mitchell, call sign Ghost, flew toward her new assignment. Behind her was vindication. Ahead was purpose. And somewhere below, young pilots who'd never met her were already dreaming of the day they'd earn their own wings and prove that excellence, courage, and determination mattered more than anyone's prejudice ever could. The mission continued. The fight was far from over. But today, at least, justice had one dot, and Lauren Mitchell was going to make damn sure it kept winning. The end.